Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man podcast. My name is Rory Paquette, and I am, as always, your very grateful host. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We have a very special guest for you. He's got a real powerful story. Can't wait for you to hear this young man, father, and husband. Um, Before we do that, I want to make sure I'm saying thank you to all of you. All of your sharing and liking and spreading the word on our podcast has just been wonderful, especially since we made the move to 5 days a week. You folks have really shown up. And I say this all the time, but I'm so grateful because if you're not out there doing what you're doing, then I can't sit over here and do what I'm doing. And it really has changed my life, and I hope that I'm doing something to help you change yours. Before we get going, if you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, then you know we got to pay a couple of bills real quick. So let's do that. I got to take a sip of my preferred beverage. All right, I got this young buck across from me at the table who's drinking like an energy drink. So let me get another sip or two of this. Just bear with me. Okay, I think I can keep up with them because you know what we're drinking. That's right, it's Freedom Hill Coffee. At Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Go check them out. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful, just like my wife. They brew a mean cup of joe. It's absolutely fantastic. They do all the right things for all the right reasons. They support veterans. You know how important that is here at Power Man. So we support them. Make sure that you go check them out at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. They're fantastic. They're wonderful. You're going to love them. And tell them Power Man sent you. All right, let me get one more sip of this before we get rocking. Because, like I said, I got to keep up with this young buck. All right, absolutely fire. Just made that stuff too. So we're killing it. All right, folks. Here we go. This guy has one heck of a story. He is a pastor and a podcaster. Name of his podcast is Just the Bible Will Do. And he, when you hear the spirit in this guy's voice, you're not going to believe that he's a pastor. I'm telling you right now, it's going to take you a minute. It's going to take you back because he does not mind sharing his thoughts and his feelings and throwing stuff out there. So please welcome the ever powerful Jonathan Smith. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing just wonderful. I really am. I
Thank you
appreciate you
so much.
joining us.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for allowing us on the Power of Man podcast. We've been looking forward. I know this has been scheduled for a couple of weeks. Been looking forward to coming on and sharing our story with everyone.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Before we get into all that, just give everybody a quick idea. Just the Bible Will Do podcast. What's that about? What do you cover on there?
Just the Bible Will Do podcast I created several years ago, about 3 years ago now. And what we do is we go through different books of the Bible. We cover Bible history, cover hot topics from time to time that come out. You know, somebody will debate something. We'll try to cover it. For example, one of the ones that we did most recently was what's the difference between hell and the lake of fire. Explain the two differences in those, and took the Bible and did it that way. The more or less our podcast is to simplify the Bible so the youngest of young can understand it, all the way up to the oldest of oldest. You don't have to have a Bible college degree behind your name to, to understand the Word of God. I did, so that's why I created this podcast. I enjoy doing it. Most of them are recordings from Wednesday night Bible studies. Right now, we're going through the life of David.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. I love that. That's one of my favorite sections right there. I mean, David's like my
Yes,
hero, to be honest, out of the Bible. So that's, I like that.
yes.
Like it. All right. Beautiful. Now, you and I have had a chance to talk a couple different times. You were on one of my other podcasts,
Mhm.
the Podcaster Nation, talking about your podcast. And when you were on that, you and I had a chance to get to know each other a little bit, and you shared some stuff about your story with me. I know that that you grew up in the church, and
Hmm.
with your relationship with your father and stuff like that, and then
Hmm.
you had a couple of experiences that sort of changed you along the way. I'm going to turn this over to you to just kind of say, hey, who is Jonathan Smith? What has led you to this point, brother? And what message is it you want to be sharing with folks? And you go wherever you think it needs to take you, and I promise I will follow you.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you again for having us on. So, to start my history, I was raised in a pastor's home. Um, I cut my teeth on the back of a church pew, more or less to say. I got saved at the age of 8 years old, got called to preach at the age of 15 years old. And it was one of my it's been one of the greatest journeys of my life. If you know me personally, you know my absolute goal was to be a state trooper. That's what I told people for years growing up. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a police officer. I want to be a state trooper. I actually got all the way to one paper. Had one paper left to fill out, and it was my physical to turn in to go to Trooper Academy. Um, and God cornered me one night and said, "It's either me or it's being a state trooper." And I said, "Well, I believe I want the will of God in my life, and I want God on my side. So I'm gonna stay as I'm gonna become a pastor. That calling's way more important than being a state trooper, and I'm grateful for our guys in blue. Please do not take me wrong on that. And I respect their job greatly, and I'm sure they would say the same thing about my job as well. If that calling's on your life, go for it. So as a young pastor, I preached a lot of revival meetings. I preached a lot of youth meetings, different things like that. At a young age, I grew up in a very strict home. We didn't listen to country music. We didn't listen to rock music. We associate with people that drank. We didn't smoke. We didn't cuss. Didn't even have a TV in our home. Um, so a very sheltered style life is what I grew up in. Well, with that being said, I appreciate that, but there are some drawbacks to having a fully sheltered life. And I'll say that to any of the men out here raising boys. Be careful sheltering your kids from things because when they get a taste of the world, they'll go buck wild. Um, and God will bring them back. So with that being said, I met a young lady in the church, not in my church, but I met her in a church, and her family was missionaries. And I won't say much about that, but anyway, we started talking, and being of the sheltered life that I was, if thought if you went to church you was a good person. That was sort of the way we was raised. You go to church, you must be saved. If you don't go to church, then you're not saved. Those types of things, which I think is totally false now. And began to date her, and then I broke up with her and ended up going wild from the time I was 18 for about a year, 18 to 19. I
Hmm.
just went crazy. I would lie to my mom and dad on Sundays and tell them I was working. And I would leave the house in my work uniform, change clothes, go hang out with friends on Sunday mornings when I was supposed to be in church. And people say, "You're a preacher." Yeah, but the problem with that is I went to church every single Sunday. Um, and my mom and dad caught on to what was going on. And my mom came to me one day and she said, "Listen, if you don't get your life under control, God's going to judge you." And I sort of laughed, because I've heard that so much growing up. Um, One night it was revival. My dad was preaching a revival meeting. It was like an hour away from the house. I didn't want to go. I went to my boss. I told my boss, I said, "Keep me an hour late because if I could stay an hour late, I don't have to go to church tonight." And he said, "Okay, deal. I need the help anyway." So stayed an hour late. They left to go to the revival meeting. I get home and use the restroom, and it's pure blood. I freak out. And at that moment, God said, "It's time to get serious about me."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh." And that's what I said. My mom never carries her phone into church. That night she did. I called her. She was the first person I called. I said, "Look, I'm on my way to the emergency room. Something's happened." And I explained this story to her. I'm trying not to be graphic, but I explained the story to her. And her and my dad was getting ready to go to the platform to preach. And she told my dad. My dad went to the platform, called for an altar of prayer, and said, "We're leaving the meeting. We're going back home to take care of our son who's in the hospital." So the church prayed for me. The doctors came in. They asked me thousands of questions, it seemed like, about what could have caused this, all of these things. And at the end of it, I looked at the doctor and I said, "Look, I'll tell you what it is. It's the judgment of God on me." I said, "I've been lit, I'm a professing Christian. I'm a professing preacher. I've been living like a heathen." And I said, "God's judging me for it." And the doctor said, "No, no, no, you're crazy." And I said, "No." I said, "I'm serious." I said, "Run whatever test you need to run, but I'm telling you, that's what it is." The doctor run every test. They run a light. They did everything. They come back and said, "We cannot find anything wrong with you. Nothing at all." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. I told you what it is, and I know what it is." Well, So that so that happened on a Wednesday night, and it really bothered me. And I began to pray and ask God, God help me, God help me, God forgive me. I felt like David in Psalm 51. I felt like my sin was ever before me. And I felt like there was no hope. And a buddy of mine called me on a Friday night or Friday. He said, "Hey man, I'm going to a revival meeting, or I'm going to a youth meeting tonight. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't really feel like going, but I need to go." Because at this point, I didn't feel like God could forgive me. I didn't feel like God would forgive me,
Mm.
if that makes sense. I felt
Yeah.
like that I felt like, I felt like that I had failed God so deeply that He wouldn't take me back. And that sounds weird being a pastor's son. That sounds weird growing up in church. We tell everybody your sin's forgivable. We tell that. But until you learn to forgive yourself, you'll never feel like you've been forgiven by God. So I'll go to church that night. I sit on we get there and it's slam full. Two seats left on the very front row. First preacher gets up and preaches, and it was, ugh. Just be honest, it was terrible. It was one of the worst sermons. Well, not now, but at that time, it felt like one of the worst sermons I'd ever heard. I was like, man, I'm ready to get out of here. This was boring. This was terrible. The
Mm.
singing wasn't good. I mean, I'm just being honest. It seemed like it was horrible. I'm like, why am I here? Why am I even here? And so I'm sitting there on the front pew. I got my Bible and I'm just sitting there, and there ain't much you can do because you're on the very front row. It ain't like you can just up and leave. That'll be noticeable. So he said, "We've got one more preacher." And I was like, thank God, you know. And I said, I hope he ain't as bored as this last guy was. Because the last guy preached like an hour and 25 minutes. I mean, he went on and on and on and on. And so they call up the next guy to preach. And the guy said, "I'm going to preach on something tonight." And he paused. And he said, "I do not know why I'm getting ready to preach the sermon that I'm getting ready to preach." He said, "I come in here and I had planned for a totally different sermon aimed exactly to young people." And he said, "Ever since I've been here tonight, me and God has fought back and forth on what I should preach." And he took his Bible and went to Joel chapter number 2. And in Joel chapter number 2, that's where God sent him the little things to judge the people of Israel. Sent in a cankerworm, a caterpillar, I mean, just little itty bitty things. And God used those little things to destroy big things. And he went over to chapter number 2, verse number 25, where God said, "And I will restore," and I'm paraphrasing the last part, "what the little things has taken away." And he lists the little animals or insects. And he preached on this thought that night, a God of restoration. And he got up and he preached everything in my life right to me. And that night I went to the altar, and I felt like I had received the ultimate forgiveness of God at that point. It was a life-changing moment for me. With all of that being said, we go out to eat. I go home. I tell my mom and dad, I said, "Look, y'all know I've not been living right. Y'all know I've not been doing right." And I said, "I got things right with God tonight." And they said, "That's good." And they said, "Well, what about your relationship with your ex-girlfriend?" I said, "I think I'm gonna go back to her." And so I did. And we got married 8 to 10 months later after I went back to her. And the first year was tough. Her parents left and went to a foreign country. And so that first year was really tough. First year of marriage is miserable anyway, but that one made it that. I mean, it shouldn't be miserable. Don't take it that way, but it's hard.
Okay.
It's especially if you've never been married. It's a huge transition. Any young man that's getting ready to get married, just listening to this, your first year of marriage is a huge transition. You're learning your spouse, who your spouse is, what they are, stuff that you dated them a while. Even if you've dated them for a long period of time, until you live with them, you don't know every fine detail,
Sure.
right?
Right.
I'm not telling you to go out and live with somebody. I'm not. But anyway, so it's a learning curve. Well, in that process, she came to me and she said, I'm not a Christian." I was like, "Whoa, so you've lied." But okay. And so we stayed together 3 years, and then she makes a profession of faith and said she got saved and that she became a Christian, and everything was going good. And then we got to year 5 in our marriage, and I was past year 5 or year 6. I was pastoring year 5. I was pastoring, and she came to me and she said, "Look, you've put in a lot of time in the ministry. You're putting a lot of time in work. If you don't start changing some things, I'm out." And that should have been a sign to me that we weren't the right fit for each other. We didn't have a child at this point. And I said, "Okay, what do I need to change?" She said, "You need to change your work schedule. I want to go on dates every Friday night. I want to live a little bit more freer." And I'm like, "Okay, well, if that keeps you here and that makes you happy, then that's what we'll do." So I changed me for her in year 5 of our marriage. I stayed pastoring. I went to my church. I said, "Look, every Friday night's family night for me. So if you need something, you need somebody, call one of the deacons, unless it's life or death." And then I noticed that she become less and less faithful to church. And then there were some areas that I'm not going to go into publicly. There was some areas spiritually that I slipped and started due to due to not being the strong spiritual person that I should have been at the time, that I went down some avenues that I shouldn't have went down, opened some doors in my spiritually that I shouldn't have opened. Um, I left my church that I pastored at, went to pastor another church, and it was chaos. I won't even talk about that in this podcast. That's a whole nother story on its own.
Sure.
And I was there for 6 months. And I went one Sunday. I'll tell you, the church was so bad. I went one Sunday and I walked up and I said, "I quit. I'm not ever coming back here again." And I shut my Bible and I left. And um, that Sunday, my wife at the time said, "It's either me or pastoring." She said, I never want to be a pastor's wife again."
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, the church called me back, not the first church I pastored, which is the one I pastor now, called me back. They heard I resigned, said, "You want to come back and pastor for us?" I said, "Absolutely, I do." And my wife at the time said, "I don't know. I don't feel like that's the best thing for us. I don't know, really want to do it. But if you think that's what's right, you do it." So we packed up from the place we lived and moved back to Mooresville. And at that time, some reconnections were made with people from the past in her life, and one thing led to another. And we speed up the time to 2021, the end of 21, the beginning of 22. I suspected unfaithfulness going
Mm.
on her side. And I had grabbed life by the horns on my side in the areas that I slipped in spiritually. I began to straighten up and said, "God, look, I can't keep doing this. I mean, I can't, I don't know what the right word is. I don't know how to say it. I don't want to I don't want to put too much out there, but I want to put enough to know that there was I was doing some partying and stuff, not drugs, but going to some parties and stuff that I probably should. I know for a fact I should have never put my name in.
Okay.
And I let her and some friends influence me in going. And, but I was trying to keep her happy because I was raised that if you ever get divorced, you can't pastor. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly at this point of my life. And so I was doing everything I could to make her happy, but yet make God happy too. The Bible says you cannot serve two masters, and you can't. And one night I um, had left church, and she said, "Look, I'm going back to my hometown. My family's in on furlough. Um, you mind if I go out of town? And I said no. Well, while she was out of town, she met up with some old acquaintances and did some things that were not right. I don't know what the age group is that listens to this podcast, so I try to keep it.
I mean, just so that you know, I mean, we're all grown men on this podcast. So
Okay.
this is a no
All
kid
right.
thing, you know what I mean? So, but it's
Okay.
still up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she cheated on me at this time, and in this period of time, we'd had a son in 2020. My son was like 2 years old at this point. And I had suspected it after she told me she met up with these friends. Well, when I went down to her hometown to meet with her parents and stuff before they left to go out back out of the States. And these friends and old acquaintances never showed back up. I was driving home from this place, called her. She was out of breath, and there was a guy in the background.
Oh,
And I
ouch.
never let her know. Yeah, and I never let her know that I knew that I heard these things. Okay. I never let on that I knew. And I'm the type of person that I try my best to hold stuff in. I deal with it myself. Like I don't just open up and talk about different things. Like if somebody does me wrong, I just take it and I move on. But they may do me wrong again, and I may go back and say, "Okay, you did me wrong here, done me wrong here. Let's fix this." So we do that. So this is in November. December, she makes another trip to her hometown, and I'm 99.9% sure that she met up with them again. And at this point, it's not, at this point, I've had about all I can take. At that same point, I had went to my deacons 3 months earlier and said, "Hey, look, things ain't quite right at home. Something's going to take place. Either she's going to get help and get right, or she's going to get out." And the reason I went to them, and I missed this part, the reason I went to them 3 months earlier before all this took place is because one night she had got intoxicated and our baby was in the room behind us. And she got mad at me because I said something about her being intoxicated. And she stuck a pistol in her mouth and said, "I'm going to pull the trigger." And this wasn't the
Wow,
first
man.
time that this had happened. The first time I was like, "Okay, no, you're not. I'll call the police." And she put it down. She would put it down, and I would talk her off the ledge. There was times that she would come to me and say, "I'm gonna kill myself. You don't love me no more. You hate me. You wish you'd never married me." There was things like that. Anytime we got in a fight, it was always, "You don't love me anymore." It was always, "You hate me." And then she got to the point that if we argued about something, she would look at me and she said, "I hate you. I wish you would just drop over dead. I hate the ground you walk on." Um,
My goodness,
and
man.
that hurt bad. And so I went to my deacon board and I told him these things. And I was very open about it. And I said, "Listen," I said, "something's got to give." Well, then I said, "I don't know what it is, but something's going to give." So when she did the cheating part, that is where I felt like I had the leverage to walk away. And I did. It was January 1st, 2022. I'll never forget it. I got up and got ready for work. I was working by myself that day. And I was walking out the door, and my little boy spilled a drink. And she said, "JC," and called my boy's name and, used Christ's name in vain. Called my little boy's name and said, "You spilled a drink." And it made me mad that she talked to a 2-year-old like this. I slammed the door and went out the door. She followed me outside. She said, "What's your problem?" And I said, "You are the problem." I'm done. I'm not living like this. And I said, November, December, you were unfaithful. This morning, and I went back and I said, you've put a gun in your mouth multiple, three times in our marriage. She threatened to kill ourselves with a pistol. Um, there was several nights I slept on the couch or in the recliner with a gun in my lap or under me because I was afraid she's gonna kill me. Um, I mean, psychotic. And I mean, I'm not bashing her. I'm not bashing her at all. Please don't take this that way. But she was completely a psychopath. I know for a fact she was on medicine for bipolar disorder and she wouldn't take her medicine half of the time, and that's when we had the most problems. Um, and it was really difficult. And so I said, I'm done. I'm walking away. Um, I called my deacons, said we're having a meeting at church tonight. I set them down. I said, look, all of this has went on. I laid it out. I said, I'm done. I'm walking away. Either y'all are
Mhm.
with me or you're against me. Take your side now, and that'll make the decision if I stay or leave the church. They said, have you cheated? And I said, no. They said, are you where you're supposed to be with God right now? And I said, at this point, I am. Yes, I am. And they said, okay, then you can stay. And I stayed at the church. Um, the divorce was going to be civil. It was going to be supposed to be fair, if there's ever such thing as a fair divorce.
Right.
I didn't retain an attorney. Strike one for me. I didn't retain an attorney.
Yeah.
I will say this now: if any of you men are getting ready to go through a divorce or going through a divorce, call every attorney office in your phone book, put your name, set up an appointment with them, and make your spouse go out of town, make your soon to be ex spouse go out of town to get an attorney. It'll cost them more, number one. Number two, actually retain at least one attorney and fight for everything you've got. Because I didn't do that. And I've been, lack of better words, I've been screwed over a couple times now. I'm paying almost $1,300 a month for one child in child support because I didn't get an attorney.
Oh,
Um,
ouch.
yeah. So, yes, yes. So get an attorney. If you have kids, fight for joint custody. So, um, she moved all of her stuff out of our bedroom, put it in our little boy's bedroom, and she was living in the little boy's bedroom. I was living in our bedroom. And then after about 3 days, she said, look, I don't feel comfortable with you here. You need to move. Like, where am I going to go?
Seriously.
Like, where am I going? So I called a friend of mine and I said, look, I need somewhere to stay until I get this straightened out. And so I moved into his house for 3 nights, but he has kids. So the nights he had his kids, I didn't have nowhere to stay. And then I went to my deacon board and I said, look, she's kicked me out of my house, so on and so forth. I don't know that most of my church knows this, but I will now. But the church paid for me to stay in a hotel for
Oh, wow.
3 weeks, 4 weeks before or during my separation period. And she moved out January the 15th, 2022, somewhere right in there. Took everything I had with the exception of my guns, my tools, and my clothes. That was all I had left. I didn't have any furniture, no TVs, nothing. Um, and I had to start over. And I'm very grateful for my church because once my church found out that I didn't have dishes, pots, pans, all that, the ladies of the church came together and threw me a housewarming party and took care of me. God has a way of vindicating his people.
Yeah.
Um, and I went I went back out on the dating scene. This is good. I went back out on the dating scene after I moved back into my house. So the separation and everything was done for over a month when I went back on the dating scene. And I was like, should I be out on the dating scene? Should I, is this soon? But to be honest, I knew for several years that this was going to come down the path.
You did.
And I will
Huh.
say this, yeah. I mean, it wasn't something that surprised me. Um, when somebody tells you time and time again that they absolutely hate you, your love for them will grow cold.
Sure.
And I heard I hate you at least once every month, if not more. And so I had begun to grow cold and immune to all of it. It got to the point that it didn't bother me. Um, so after the separation, I said, you know what? I'll throw my name out in the dating field. I'll just see what happens. If I find somebody, yeah. If I don't, I ain't lost nothing. I'm not gonna look for nothing serious. Like I wasn't looking to hook up or anything. That's not the type of person I am. So to clarify that.
Okay.
But being a pastor, that's not a good reputation anyway.
Right.
But anyway, I was just putting feelers out there. I said, we'll see what happens. You know, here I have been through it, but I wanna, I'm going on 33 at this point. I don't want to really my life is short, but if I'm going to start over, now's the time to start over sooner than later. So I get all this behind me, the divorce and everything. No, the divorce wasn't finalized. The separation, all the separation paperwork and everything was signed. And I put my name, once the separation paperwork was signed, I put my name out on the dating scene. I went to Facebook dating, went on a date with a couple girls, just nothing to write home about. One of them catfished me. That's a whole story in itself.
Oh,
She was mentally she cat she had catfished numerous people apparently, but I didn't know it. She had a picture of her sister on her Facebook dating profile. When I met her in person, she looked like a totally different person. And this girl was mentally challenged,
oh,
in
man.
lack of better words. So yeah, I got catfished. I stayed for the entire date. I even paid for her meal, but I got catfished.
There you go.
Um, then I talked to several different girls. I never went out. And then I met Brittany, my wife now, and me and her talked. I liked her on face. I liked at the time Facebook dating. I don't even know if it's still out there, but I liked her. I liked her profile, her dating profile. And if she liked mine back, then I could message. We could message each other, and so we began to message each other. And I said, um, "Here is my Snapchat," and I said, and so what, but when I went out on the dating profile, I set up a fake Snapchat. And the reason I did was because if I met a girl and she was going ended up being the right one, because you might be talking to several different ones before you take any of them out on a date. And you don't want them to have your phone number because
Right.
that could be bad. So you have a Snapchat. I had a fake Snapchat set up. And then if you get in a serious relationship with a girl, you delete that Snapchat account and then you lose all contact with the people that you were talking to so you can focus on this serious relationship. That was my
Hmm.
purpose of that.
Interesting. All right.
Okay. You don't become friends with them on Facebook. You don't look them, you look them up on Facebook, you go through their profile, but you don't like add them as friends or anything because once you go into a true relationship with someone, you want there to be no other baggage behind you.
Sure.
Um, so I met my wife now, and we began to text, and then I gave her my phone number because I felt confident she wasn't catfishing me. And actually this was funny. I would make her send videos on Snapchat of her talking to me to make sure I wasn't getting catfished.
There you go.
And so then we started talking, and then we went out on a date on Saturday. And then we went back out on a date on Sunday. And then we went out on a date Monday night. And ever since then we've been together, um as boyfriend and girlfriend. And it was rough at first. She went with me to pick up my son. My son doesn't live with me. He lives with his mama full time. I get him 5 to 6 times a year. That's something, men, that I'll encourage you if you're going through a divorce, get 50-50 custody of your children. Um, Number one, you don't have to pay child support if you get 50-50 custody. Number two, it's it's I would rather have a relationship with my son than have to pay child support.
Right.
I FaceTime him 3 times, 4 times a week. Um, but he's not here. He's not local. He's 6 to 7 hours down the road. It's hard to build a relationship with a child that's 7 hours away from you.
Yeah, it is.
Um, that's
Yeah.
been tough. And so I tell my ex-wife, hey, look, I'm getting ready to get remarried. So she calls the church and tries to tell people at the church that I had my current wife, my wife now, on the string the whole time that we were going through the separation and in the background. Well, I didn't meet my wife until after all the separation papers were signed, and I could prove all of that. So that didn't stick.
Yeah.
And I just kept having mud thrown, mud thrown, mud thrown. And my wife now, at that time we were dating, and I said, Brittany, this is something that we're going to have to work through together. This is not something that's going to go away overnight. And at times it's going to get better, and at times it's going to get worse. And I said, if you come into this life with me, not only are you going to have the pressure of being a pastor's wife, but you also have to deal with all the baggage behind me because divorce takes you out of a person's life, but it does not take that person out of your life completely, if that makes sense.
Yep. Absolutely.
Divorce means I do not have to live with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but I still have to put up with your crap all of the time. I mean, just let's be honest.
Yeah.
And um, during the time that I was dating my wife now, I had phone calls from preachers asking me when I was going to resign my church because they had heard I was in another relationship. They told me I couldn't pastor. They told me to give up preaching to get me to go get a secular job and give up ministry. Excuse me, give up ministry altogether. They would tell me I wasn't welcome in their church or in their church circles or in their group of preachers because I was divorced and it looked like I could be getting remarried, and that disqualified me from all service in the church, with the exception of Sunday school teacher or one of their gophers, basically. And that's just the way that it was.
So
And I said, no,
it wasn't the divorce then that caused that separation from the church. It was trying to get remarried.
both. They
Okay,
look
really?
at that if, yes, okay, so they look at that when give vows till death do us part, that's a vow between you, your spouse, and God. And once you break that, once you get a divorce, that you have broken that vow with God, and that disqualifies you from ministry.
Well, doesn't it make a difference if she broke it by, cheating on you, for goodness sakes? I mean, didn't she
That's
kind
what
of
I
destroy the
said.
whole pond on her own?
Exactly. 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 So I said, what do you do about a biblical divorce? They said there's no such thing as a biblical divorce. I said, absolutely there is. I believe it's the book of Matthew lays out the grounds of a biblical divorce and what a biblical divorce is all about. If a person steps outside the bounds of marriage, then there's grounds for a biblical divorce. Now, I will say this, that I believe it goes further than that. I believe mental abuse, physical abuse, cheating, and different types of abuse is grounds for divorce. If you'd have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said, no, there's zero grounds for divorce. Watching someone stick a pistol in their mouth multiple times, telling you that they're going to kill themselves, something's got to give.
Hmm.
Someone looking at you day in and day out saying, I hate you, I hate the ground you walk on. There was times that I would leave the house so that I could just have peace, and going out the door, I hope you die in a car wreck. Those are things that you don't get over. And those are things that if those same people who were calling for my resignation, if those same preachers were going through what I'd went through, they'd have went through a divorce too.
Sure.
And I will say this, never judge someone if you've not walked a mile in their shoes.
Oh,
If you've
100%.
not been through a divorce, if you've not been through a separation, if you've not been through any of that, do not judge someone that is going through that. Number two, if it's your fault that you're going through a divorce, own up to it. I know this is a man's podcast. Man, if you cheated and you screwed up your marriage, man up. Say, I screwed up. Yeah, I'm the reason that I'm going through a divorce.
Right.
If you're abusive to your wife, if you're mentally, physically, spiritually abusive to your spouse, then shame on you, number one. But number two, man up and learn from it and move on. Um, Looking at that, I was in one of the darkest places of my life at this point in my life. And I've got so-called people that were so-called friends, pastors who said, we'll stick through you no matter what, turning on me like dogs.
Wow.
And I'd never felt so low. So I told my current wife at the time we were dating, I said, look, if you're going to marry me, if you're going to date me, you're going to have to be ready for the criticism. I said, mud's going to come from the ex, mud's going to come from other preachers, and you'll either deal with it or you'll get out. And I said, and if you get out, there's no coming back. I said, you, I'm not playing games. I'm not just dating to be dating. I'm looking for somebody that's going to stick with me no matter what.
Right.
Um, and she said, you're serious about this? I said, I'm very serious about this. I said, if I would have listened to myself the first time, I wouldn't be in this mess today. I reg I'm gonna say that I'm gonna be very careful how I say this. I do not regret having a son. I do not. But I regret marrying the person that I married the first time.
Sure. Big
If you are
difference.
a
Yeah.
man and you're about to get married and you've got questions about it, don't do it. If you got reservations about it, don't do it. Um, Marry a person that you have zero reservations about,
Sure. How
that you
long
have zero questions.
how long had you guys, because I was trying to do the math and keep up with that, so pardon me if I'm missing that, but I want to make sure I'm getting it right. How long were you guys married when the infidelity happened?
11 years.
Wow. And the only reason I ask that is not to rub salt in the wound. It's just that, there's a certain point for, us as men where we kind of feel like, all right, we've put in the time, we're safe now.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, 11 years, you figure, all right, we've been together more than a decade. We're okay. If it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. I mean, there's a certain amount of security and safety you want to try and draw from that. But um, my gosh,
In year seven, 5 or 7, when she told me that that she wanted to leave, I believe there was some infidelity there. I don't have proof, so this is all speculation, but I suspected infidelity with the same sex of somebody else.
oh wow,
And I could never prove it. I tried my best to prove it. Um, had I been able to prove it and got a divorce then, I would have resigned my church instantly. I would have gotten out of the ministry. And I thank God over and over and over and over and over again that I never could find out to prove it. And I thank God that I couldn't find out at that particular time to get out of the ministry because it would have took me out of the ministry just because of the way I believed.
sure,
So during my divorce process, when all of these preachers are turning against me, I have three mentors. I have a preacher of 50 years, I have a preacher of 40 years, and I have my dad. And my dad's been pastoring almost 40 years now. My dad's the last person. I love my dad to death. Me and my dad have our disagreements. My dad is my last person when it comes to pastoring and when it comes to preaching that I ask for advice because I do not feel that at times that advice is unbiased, if that makes sense.
sure. You're his son, so yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
right. So that he is the very last person that I get advice from. If it is a huge church decision, I don't even talk to him about it. I let that decision be made. Um, I let that decision be made between me, my deacons, and if I seek counsel somewhere else, then I will. So during this time, I call one of my I call one of my mentors. I tell him what I'm facing. And he told me, he said, "Do you believe God called you to preach?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you believe in the all-knowing of God?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you believe that before the foundation of the world, God knew you'd be a preacher?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you believe before the foundation of the world, God knew you'd get a divorce?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Then for you to sit and say that you cannot preach because you have been divorced means that God made a mistake in calling you to preach." I was like,
Right.
dang, I can't
Right.
argue with that one. That sums it all up. And so I stuck by that. Fast forward to August of 2023. I asked my current wife to marry me at my birthday party that the church threw me. She had no clue. The church had no clue. I'd went out and bought a ring and asked her to marry me. We got married in April of 24. I have two stepdaughters. As I mentioned, I have a son and I have another child on the way. We don't know the gender of it yet. Um, so divorce was tough. The transition into remarriage has had its challenging moments. Spiritually, from the rocks being thrown from the outside from other pastors and other Christians, people that's never been through a divorce. Um, Financially, readjusting, going from having to rebuild back what everything was taken away during the divorce to today. Um, that was challenging. Um, Adapting to being a stepfather as well as a father. Um, Co-parenting with other people that you don't know. I mean, I've met them.
Hmm.
When I talk about, I've met my daughter's dad and stepmom, and we have a good relationship, and I'm grateful for that. But co-parenting, as in, hey, my child wants to play this sport. Okay, well, let's play. Well, we got to ask the other party. So it's always a learning curve
Yeah.
in that aspect of it. Um, so if you are getting a divorce and you're looking to get remarried, take into account when you meet someone, do number one, never compare them to your ex. Never.
Yeah.
Never look and say sorry. Never look and say, okay, well, I like this woman, but her hair looks like my ex's hair. Or she says some of the things, if that is one of the first things that pops in your mind, run. Quickly, run. Get out of it. Um, Number two, be a little bit more careful in your selection when it comes to a wife. Date them for a longer period of time, um, to and learn them. Go out to eat with them or with their family and see how they act with their family. And how she talks to her dad is how she'll talk to you as a husband,
Hmm. That's a good point.
if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Look at her mom. The Bible says, as the mother is, so is the daughter.
Right.
And look at their mom and say, okay, is her mom a godly woman? Is her mom a submissive wife? And I'm not talking about being used as a doormat. Please do
Sure.
not think me that way. But is her mom what she needs to be? And in my situation, I've never met my wife's real mom. I met her stepmom. Her her real mom doesn't. We don't have. There's no relationship.
Hmm.
She knows there's a grandbaby. Congratulations. That's all she said about it. She don't want to know what gender is. Don't want to know nothing about it. So I looked at her stepmom. Her stepmom came in her life at 7 years old. Is that right? 4 or 7. I can't remember the exact age. Came in her life at a young age. Let's say it that way. And I looked at the work ethic of her stepmom. Well, that's what she would have taught my soon-to-be wife, which was very good. So there are qualities there. And I ask, are you saved? Yeah, I'm saved. Do you read your Bible? Yeah. Do you pray? Yeah. I mean, those were questions that I asked. Yeah, they're simple questions, but those are things I didn't ask in my first go around. Those were things that I learned from. So I learned from my mistakes. I learned not to allow influences to come in that can take you down a path that you never dreamed you would go down. Number one. Number two, I found somebody that respected me as much as I respected them.
That's
Number
huge.
three, I found
Yeah.
somebody that, yeah, that's very huge. Number three, I found somebody with the same work ethic that I had, the same dreams, the same visions.
Wow.
And how did I learn that? Always let someone else talk. Never ask, never tell them, never play. It's like playing poker. When you're on the dating scene, it's playing poker. Let them talk. Let them tell you what their dreams are. Let them tell you what their ambitions are. Let them play all of their cards. Let them talk. Don't say, "Oh yeah, I have the." No, let them talk, and then open up and play your cards. Because what I have learned in ministry is that if I open up and tell you, okay, I want to do this or I want to do that, you may say, yeah, 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 yeah. And then we get married, and then you say, well, this ain't what I thought it was going to be. Because we don't share the same values on this. We don't have the same idea on this. We don't. And then here you're going through divorce number two
Mhm.
or divorce number three. And if that takes place, you've got to learn to take these areas in your life and make them stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks. Take your past mistakes, take your past experiences, and lay them forward and say, okay, I learned from this. I learned from that. You do not have to say to your current spouse or partner that you're dating, you do not have to say, well, my ex did this or my ex did that. No, 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 no. Don't do that at all. That's bad news. But what you can do is you can say, okay, in my past relationship, I said this to my ex-wife and it wasn't the right thing to say. So I'm not going to say it here.
Right.
Or I did this in my previous marriage and it screwed up my previous marriage. I'm not going to do it in this marriage.
Right.
So take what you did in your past and what hurt your past marriage and use it and say, I'm not going to do that again. And if I'm tempted to do it again, I'm going to run from it. If all of that makes sense. I know I was a little scattered on my life, but I wanted to be very careful on that. But
Not at all. No, I know that you're trying to step carefully here, and that's expected. It's also smart, so I don't blame you at all. I mean, I have probably a zillion questions. You know what I mean? But we have to keep the time of the podcast down to where everybody can hear it. So I'll just ask a couple. You know, if that's okay with you.
yeah,
How do you rationalize in your mind? Is it and in your heart staying with somebody that has done that, that has committed adultery? You know, because you said you suspected it years prior, and then yet you still somehow found a way to stay married and continue trying to be forgiving and, intimate and so on. How do you do that when you've been betrayed on such a base level?
to suspect it, it was very hard. I just couldn't prove it. If I could have proved it, I'd have got out.
Okay.
Um, it was God that protected me because I'd have got out of the ministry and everything at that point. And who knows, I may have made that same mistake again. So if you can't prove it, if you suspect it but can't prove it, don't move. Sit tight. And if you feed someone enough rope, they'll hang themselves every time. And that's what I did. I just I just let it ride. I said I can't prove it. I'm not going to drive myself crazy about it. If they want to throw away the marriage, if they want to make these mistakes, and I wasn't a perfect husband by no means, so I'm not saying that at all. But if they want to go down this path and they want to ruin, what we have,
Yeah.
then I'm going to let them. And when this marriage is over, they're going to be able to point fingers, and yeah, they're going to be able to throw up my past. They're going to be able to throw up things from my past. But presently, I'm clean. Futuristically, I'm clean.
Yeah.
You can go back and tell somebody something I did 5 years ago? Go for it. And when they ask, how long ago was that? 5 years ago. Oh, I thought that was last week. Um, there is no, in my book, I forgive my ex-wife for all of the stuff she's done. I've told her straight up a couple times now. I have no hard feelings towards you. A few weeks ago, she got extremely mad at me and cussed me out like a dog on the phone. And she told me then, she said, I hate you. I hope you die. And I said, used to, that would bother me. I said, used to, I would ask, can I please die now so I can get out of this? I said, I don't have to live with this no more. I don't have to deal with this no more.
Right.
And I said, I do not hate you. I said, I hope the best for you. I want you to succeed in life. I want you to do good in life. I think once the trust level, though, has been broken on either side of the fence,
Yeah.
if you're a man and you've cheated, or if you're in a situation where you've been cheated against, I know that we as Christians are supposed to have ultimate forgiveness, but I don't think that there's any reconciliation for a cheater because I've seen it happen. People reconcile from cheating and it happens again.
Yeah.
And so you sort of run
Man.
that label once a cheater, always a cheater, but that's not true. You may have cheated in your first marriage, or you may be cheating now in your marriage. But once your cheating gets exposed, it'll either humble you and you will say, hey, this is not going to happen again, or it will harden you to where you will always have the reputation as a cheater.
Hmm.
I hope to God at a young age that it humbles you. I cheated in our third year of marriage, not physically, but through texting. I didn't see anything nasty or like nudes or nothing, but just emotion, just, hey, how are you? And it led from there.
Wow.
And this is where I said I'm a perfect husband. I meant to tell this earlier in the podcast, but I'll tell it now. I cheated. That was a scar that followed me all the way through my marriage. The woman's husband found out. He threatened to come to the church that I was attending at the time and tell it. And I said, look, I didn't do anything physically with her. All I've been doing is texting her, and it went a little further than it should have. I didn't physically touch her. I didn't do any of that. And I said, I will make this promise to you that I've asked God to forgive me. And since I've asked God to forgive me, I will make this promise you will never hear again that Jonathan Smith has cheated. And he said, whatever. I said, I ask you to forgive me. He said, I cannot forgive you now. 7 years ago, I was on a golf course. My phone went off. I looked down, 3 words on that in a text message to me. I forgive you.
Wow.
And it was that person. They had split up. They had went through a divorce. I, she was talking and doing stuff with a bunch of other guys. I was just one of the ones that she talked to.
Yeah.
Um, that followed me through my marriage, but I learned from it that I would never do it again. And I did it. I stayed faithful. I stayed true. Um, but the reconciliation of it was hard because I think at some point in her mind, she was never good enough,
Hmm.
but she never learned to forgive me either. And that may have been some of the reason that she said she hated me. I don't think so because it happened, like I said, within 3 years, the first 3 years of our marriage, and we moved on from it fairly quick. Um, approve myself. Like I would give her, like I'd say, go through my phone, go through my text, go through my emails, go through whatever you want to go through. And we never had another trouble like through that again. That was one things that I learned in my past marriage that I
Yeah.
made a promise that would never happen again. And I've never put myself in a situation where that can't happen again because it started off so innocent. It started off of me and my husband had a fight today, and I became a listening piece. And then,
Right. Yeah. Do you suppose maybe that's one
so
of the reasons why you put up with the infidelity on the other end? Because maybe you thought like it was justice or you deserved it or something like that?
the first time, yes.
Yeah.
At the 7 year mark where I suspected it, yes. I felt like that it was revenge. You hear revenge, sex, revenge. So I felt like that some of that was there, but I could never prove it.
Yeah.
Um, I also felt like that if I did, she could go back and tell something that happened 4 years ago at that point, that would damage me, and it didn't. And 12 years later, that came up anyway, and it didn't stick. So,
Wow. All right.
um, so that's where. So yes, I believe that I deserve some of that. I feel like I deserve some of that, so I think that's why I stuck some of it out.
Sure.
The other part of it was I didn't want to give up pastoring, so I just said I'll ignore it, and it'll go away. She'll straighten up. Never did.
Speaking of the pastor, and how did you finally rectify things with the church where the people were coming at you saying, when are you giving up your pastorship,
The
because you want to get remarried and that's not okay.
the people that did that was on the outside of the church.
Okay.
Nobody on the inside of the church openly said that to me. There was some things that I'm not going to talk about that happened on social media that the people of the church seen, and it opened their eyes that I was not wrong
Hmm.
on her side of the story.
Oh, like that. Okay.
Yes.
You don't have to say anymore. I think
And
everybody gets it now.
and yep, and when the other side began to post things and say things and do things that were they would come up to me and said, "Wow, how did you deal with that?
Right.
How did you see what I'm saying?"
Yeah.
So it was like a 180-degree turn publicly once they got out and got their freedom. Um, so what other question you got for me
Wow,
on
man.
this?
I mean, the whole thing is just surreal. I'm sure to have to be living through that and um, trying to trying to be there for so many others. And I think maybe that's as we kind of round this out and start to kind of wrap things up. The I guess the one more thing that I want to ask you is, um, as a pastor, one of your greatest callings is to be there for your congregation, to
Hmm.
to help them, to serve them.
Hmm.
And so how do you manage to do that on the outside when on the inside, your personal life is going through that kind of upheaval? You know what I mean? Where does it come from then to be able to put forth more out there to help the folks that are dependent on you? How tough was that?
It was very tough. Um, there were days that when I got done preaching, that I would go home and lock myself up in a bathroom and cry.
Mm.
Um, there were days that I would be at work and I would get so emotional that I, at that time, I had a box trailer, and I would just go in there and shut my box trailer, and I would cry. And when I quit crying, I would come back out and go back to work.
Ouch.
Um, and it was very tough to handle that type of pressure. It was very tough to mentally, physically, spiritually. And it was by God's grace we made it through. I think it softened my heart as a pastor for other people that could go through divorce or was talking about going through divorce. Um, I think it softened my heart as a pastor to be able to relate to people who are battling with depression, discouragement, being brokenhearted, downtrodden. I was able to, during that time, to preach some messages that helped a lot of people that I preached to myself,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Sure.
I would go up and I would preach my heart. I would preach what I was going through, but what I was facing at the time. I may not preach what I was going through physically, but spiritually.
Yeah.
Like feeling like when I read the Bible, it was white ink. I mean, black ink on white paper. When I prayed, it felt like I was praying to a wooden statue. When, somebody would ask me something spiritually, I felt like I was inadequate. I felt like the lowest of the lows. And to preach that, it related to a lot of other people that were spiritually in the same place I was, maybe not due to a divorce, but maybe due to health reasons, and maybe due to financial reasons, maybe due to whatever in their life. But as far as going to the pulpit, and I said this to you the other day or the other night, I felt like I was the biggest hypocrite in the church because I would come in the church, I'd put a smile on my face, I would shake your hand. You ask me how life was going, it's good. How's your little boy doing? He's good. How are you dealing with everything? I'm good. And I put on a front of being this strong person when inside I was miserable,
Yeah.
hurting. I will tell you are the first person that I have, besides my wife now, you are the first person that I've opened up to and went from A to Z on all of this. And no, I didn't give every detail, and I'm not going to give every detail
Sure.
due to other
Sure.
reason to protect me. But I would tell anyone today if I was going through this again, I don't care how much money it costs, I would get me a really good therapist and sit down and talk about it. Because to this day, there are still things that trigger me from my past.
Hmm.
A few Sundays ago, I was preaching and I said, it hurts when somebody tells you, I hate you. And I teared up because I remember how it felt when that was told to me.
Yeah.
And I was talking about how Christ was on the cross and they handed him vinegar. That was a sign of, I hate you.
Right.
Um, so there are things that I still get triggered by today that had I feel like if had I went to a proper therapist and talked to them about it, I may not get as triggered by today.
Yeah. Good advice. Good advice. Wow. There was some other questions that I had, but you really answered a lot of them as because I wanted to just let you tell your story and not be interjecting all the time. And so you covered a lot of stuff. And Jonathan, first of all, I just want to thank you for coming on here and sharing the story because there's a ton of men out there who recount stories like this to me and don't have the capacity to deal with it with the grace in which you dealt with it. And I know you had some low points too, but to turn around and be there, I mean, that they're saying, hey, how can I be here for my kids when I feel so empty inside? And you had to be there
Hmm.
for, not only your kid, but, your entire congregation. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I get it and I see it. So thank you for just laying it all out and letting everybody
Right.
just kind of hear it. That was
Well,
really something.
thank you for letting me come on and tell a piece of my story.
Sure.
Um, are there things I wish I would have done different in my past? Absolutely. Are there things that I've learned not to do in this marriage? Absolutely.
Right.
Um, like I said, always take your past, make it a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. Learn to forgive yourself. If you can learn to forgive yourself, you can forgive anybody else. I can honestly say today, I've truly forgiven myself for the mistakes that I've made. I've learned from them. I've forgiven my ex, um, even though the people that they hung around has never came and said, I'm sorry, has never came and said, hey, I helped mess things up. I've forgiven them. Um, I have no hard feelings, no bitterness in my heart toward any of those people. Um, I would help them any way I could.
Right. I mean, you kind of just did it, but I usually end with, a question. I'm going to throw it at you anyway, because you may have a little bit more. Is there anything I didn't ask you about? Anything that I did ask you about, you want to make sure you kind of like drive home, or like you just did, you've given a lot of advice to guys who may be going through this. One more little nugget or something that we didn't cover that you want to make sure you get out there, and the floor is yours for the last minute.
Okay. If you are going through a divorce or getting ready to go through a divorce, grab and you say you're in a new relationship. Say your separation. Number one, don't get in a relationship without separation papers being filed. Um, and check your state laws because even if your separation paperwork is filed, you cannot go into a relationship. That can still be considered adultery and you can lose everything you got. So just be careful on that.
Wow.
Um, yeah, state of South Carolina is one of those states. I did not live in the state of South Carolina at the time, so I didn't have to worry about that. Um, Another thing too is if you're going through a divorce, be careful who you talk to about it because not everybody who's your friend is really your friend.
Sure.
One of the areas of betrayal that I've learned is people that said that they were my friend was getting information from me and was taking it back to the other party. So keep a very close circle. Give limited information. Do not go on Facebook or social media and trash the other party. Quietly do your business. Um, the whole world doesn't need to know everything going on. They may go out and trash you. I've been trashed numerous times. There was a country music song that was put out that said, Mama said, if I didn't have nothing good to say, or it's not what he did, it was things he didn't do. I can't remember who put that out. I'm a huge country music person too, but not on newer stuff. But anyway, um, there were things that were said about me on social media. Don't respond to it. Just let it go because all it's going to do is make things worse. It will not make things better. Your character will speak for itself. Um, you know, there was trash thrown at me on Facebook. There was trash thrown at me at my church. Even some of her family called my church and was trying to throw stuff and write stuff on my wedding day. I got nasty messages on my wedding day a year ago from their family
Nice.
and just stupid stuff. Pardon my language, just stupid stuff. Ignore it. Let it go. Don't respond to it because the best answer is no answer in those situations. Don't throw mud because mud's being thrown at you. You have nothing to prove to nobody
Good advice.
except you and God. Yep.
Good advice. Good advice. All right, brother. Again, thank you for sharing all that and the advice. You've been through the ringer on it, and I know that there's a lot of guys out there who are going to take a lot out of this episode. And basically, I mean, if a pastor, has to go through a lot of this stuff, then the rest of us are in a lot of trouble. So, I
Yes.
understand. I understand totally. Um, Jonathan Smith, everybody, pastor and podcaster. Jonathan, thanks for coming on and sharing that part of your story, brother.
Yes, sir. No trouble at all. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I think you're going to put the link in this podcast. But if anybody wants to reach out to me, you can find me on Facebook at Pastor Jonathan Smith 2006. Feel free to message me, talk to me. I don't mind messaging on Facebook and helping you through it. I'll give you some advice. I may not give you all the advice you need, but I can give you some to get through this. Or if there's anything spiritually that I can do, I will.
Sounds good. Wonderful. And don't forget to check him out on his podcast, Just the Bible Will Do, which you guys can look up and find. I'll have the podcast linked. We'll have the Facebook link in there. Jonathan, thanks for coming on today, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. And I hope something that was said and done, number one, brought glory to God. Number two, helped someone that listens to the podcast.
There you go. I'm sure it did. Folks, that's another episode of the Power Man podcast. The reason that we bring powerful men like this on to talk about powerful topics like these is because, hey, this is a life we live. If people like Jonathan and I can get through this stuff when we deal with it, then you know what? So can you. All right. And the reason that we bring people on like this to talk to you and to let you to give you a hand up in solving these problems is because you're worth it, because you have value, no matter what someone else might make you feel like. Don't ever let anybody else determine whether or not you have that value. All right. Folks are worth it. You just have to believe it. Until next time.